We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
that's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Oderman.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom here on the Lions of Liberty Network. Excited to be talking to you on a Monday afternoon. Of course, on Lions of Liberty, big news recently as we added our friends Lou Perez and Brian Nichols to the mix here. You can hear their shows on Tuesday for Lou and Thursday for Brian. And of course, you always get me on Monday. And my longtime colleague, Brian McWilliams, with his show, Mean Age Daydream, on Wednesdays. I want to get into this interview quick. I am going to be joined here in a moment by Austin Petersen, so we'll bring him in. But first, I got to remind you guys about my favorite coffee. Coffee I've been drinking for about a year now. Absolutely love it. Fox & Sons coffee. It's just a great way to start your day. My friend Stephen Fox, he started this company as a way to teach entrepreneurship to his boys and to reminisce about spending some time with his father as he was growing up, drinking coffee and enjoying some good stories. So you can order your own Fox & Sons coffee and get 15% off an order of $40 or more by using code JOHN, that's JOHN, at foxnsons.com. That's Fox, the letter N, sons.com. So check it out and enjoy some coffee. All right, let's bring in my guest for today, and it is Austin Petersen. Austin Petersen, of course, he's a libertarian commentator. He's an entrepreneur. He's the host of the Wake Up America show. It's a daily 2-hour show that he streams live from Jefferson City, Missouri. Of course, Austin, where I first met Austin was back in 2015, 2016, when he was running for president on the Libertarian Party ticket. Then, of course, in 2018, he ran in Missouri for for Senate as a Republican. And he's also a business owner, an entrepreneur, an advocate for individual liberty, freedom of speech. Great to have you back on the show, Austin. How you been?
Oh, pretty good, John. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, and it's always good to talk to another freedom lover, another liberty lover who has a mustache. There's not enough.
Yeah, what's funny is I grew out the mustache I don't know, a couple months ago, and everybody has an opinion on it, right?
Yeah.
You should shave it, you should grow it out, you should have a beard, all this stuff. And then, I was kind of like, wow, everybody has really strong opinions about the mustache, especially the people who are like anti-mustache, don't have a mustache. Mm-hmm. And then I saw a reel I was watching with my wife the other day, and it was like how the Magnum PI look is returning. And I'm like, yes, Tom Selleck, Magnum PI, that's my style. Mustache. I need to get the short shorts though.
You have to.
The ones where like your sack might be kind of like hanging out the side almost a little bit, but
from a certain angle, possibly. Yeah. No, yeah, it's true. The mustache is making a comeback. I've had mine for almost 2 years, and I didn't plan on it. I grew it out when I was on a vacation at the beach. Just I'll keep it for a few months. And then I asked my wife, should I shave it? She's like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. And that just kept happening. I would ask, I don't know if I'm ready for that. I'm like, okay, all right, we'll keep it. See what happens. But
libertarian mustaches. We need to start a club.
Yes, of course. I will, of course, be proud to be in that club. But Austin, like I was saying in the intro, I think you were on this show back in the day several times. I know we had our libertarian debates when you were running on Lions of Liberty. You've since then, many years ago, left the Libertarian Party. You're a Republican. I did the same. I've left the LP. I'm now a Republican. I'm just curious, kind of, to get your temperature now on where you're sitting politically after Donald Trump's first, 130 days or so. How you feeling about the Republican Party, about Trump's second term?
I would say that I probably am, in terms of the issues, I probably am like, 8 out of 10, 80% exactly where I was back in 2016 when I ran for president as a libertarian. I've started to moderate some of my views on certain issues that the libertarian movement, I think, has kind of just gone way over the cliff on left-wing issues. And so I would say that, those 20% of things where 10% of libertarians have gone super left on some of the social issues, and 10% of libertarians have gone super left on some of the foreign policy issues. I've kind of maybe I've just stayed where I'm at, but just strengthened my views on those things. We can talk about those a little bit later. But in terms of my political tactics, I've always been very pragmatic. We need to have radical views. Right. I mean, I much prefer to hang out with, anarcho-capitalists than I do any sort of authoritarian statist. But, I just, I've been a libertarian and an activist since 2007. I voted for Ron Paul twice. So that's how old I am at this point. That used to be the fresh young thing. And now it's the not fresh, very not young thing. Everybody who's ever voted for Ron Paul is old now. And especially if you voted for him in 1988, you are very old. But
well, you didn't do that thoh, right?
No, I did not.
If you did, you've aged very well.
No, I was alive then. But I really think that the American libertarian movement, sadly, has kind of gone off a cliff. Or if it's dead, if it's not dead, it's on life support. It's definitely brain dead, and the heart's pumping, but only because certain of us are still out there, with the corpse, one Mississippi, two Mississippi, ha, staying alive, like they teach you in CPR classes, trying to keep it alive because we used to be the fad politics. Everybody wanted to be a libertarian. It was cool. Ron Paul revolution, rebellion. But then the new fad politics is here, and it's anti-libertarian, it's post-liberal, it's against many of the views of the things that What's fascinating is that a lot of the people will say things like Ron Paul is right about everything, but they don't agree with him on pretty much any of his economic positions or issues that that are very in vogue today when it comes to fad politics. So in some sense, if you want to stay alive, you've got to know which battles you've got to pick your battles, which battles are worth fighting, which hills are worth dying on, and which ones aren't. Certain hills are worth defending and certain hills aren't. And that's really been the eternal struggle. But for the most part, I mostly don't pick fights with libertarians online. Every once in a while, I'll make a joke or something. But I'm not trying to get into debates with Dave Smith or Clint Russell or even what's his name actually it's funny I even forget his name, the 2024 Libertarian presidential candidate Chase Oliver. Yeah, that's
how forgettable he is. What's his name? Yeah.
Here's the thing. I had to explain to Stephanie who he was because a month ago he was criticizing me because I voted for Donald Trump, but the tariffs were going to hurt my shoe business because I import my shoes from China. And so he actually posted owning a tweet that was to own me. And then every Democratic, socialist, leftist account out there, even including a Harry Sisson, were all taking Chase Oliver's tweet and spinning it out of context and attacking me as if I was getting owned for, getting what I deserved when I voted for Donald Trump, et cetera, even though it was completely out of context. So, but I didn't engage with him. I didn't go. I found it interesting that the majority of people who follow him and support him are all these leftists, but I don't go out there and I mostly don't kick the dogs. You don't kick every barking dog as you go down the street. So I try, I did a debate with Dave Smith maybe 2 years ago at this point. Whenever October 7th was, we did an Israel, Palestine, Gaza debate. Every once in a while, I'll comment on the issue in regards to disagreeing with him on, him versus Douglas Murray or something like that. But for the most part, I don't engage with libertarians because I just think it's really just pointless. It's masturbatory. It doesn't do anything, make you feel good. Your people all fight with you. I know that it's the fad politics. Everybody debates and fights, but I don't think anybody is learning anything from these debates. I don't see people actually coming in. So I do what I kind of always have done to a large extent, which is try and build healthy communities. And even if those communities are small, or if they need to be small, in order to keep them small, in order to have them be a little bit more pure in terms of actually having conversations or discussions or things. So I've been a really big fan of using social media to create small, exclusive groups that are built on sort of mutual, not admiration societies, but sort of mutual aid societies that are just more people who really are self-identified libertarians. They're not, post-liberal, sort of like where a lot of the Mises crowd has kind of like exited stage right to join like Groypers and things like that. And then, the Chase Oliver, rainbow flag people have kind of like exited stage left to go to with the Harry Sison crowd and all those people, right? So I've kind of just kept my following, as to the extent that, it's small. I keep it strong by trimming hedges, by having private property rights and saying, listen, this is kind of the rules of the group. We believe in liberty to the greatest extent, but we also believe in tyranny on private property. And if you don't like it here and you don't like the rules, get out, essentially get off my lawn. So I create communities that are smaller, but healthier because, people actually get to know each other on a social basis. That's more than just a heart or a like or a click or a retweet. I build community and I set up events, like in real life person events, and teach people about history. So for example, about a month ago, I took a group to Washington, DC to advocate for, whatever anybody was interested in talking about with our congressman. So I showed people who have never gone to Washington, DC before, how to go to how to meet your congressman, how to talk to him about issues, right? So I had my congressman, I set up a meeting with him. And when he came out, I told my congressman, hey, congressman, you're doing a great job on this and this and this, but I wish you wouldn't do this, and I wish you wouldn't do this, and I wish you wouldn't do that, and all that kind of stuff. And I said all that right to his face, right in front of that crowd, right? So that everybody knows, reminded, this is how you talk. They work for you. You don't work for them. And, then we went to George Washington's house and we saw Revolutionary War reenactments. It was an epic trip. So I'm doing stuff like that. And, I do my 5-day-a-week talk show, and I'm just trying to stay as true north as possible while recognizing that purity is a utopian ideal and that you'll never achieve it, and that fighting with libertarians is a waste of time. The real fight is out there. You know what I mean? So that's a general summary of what I'm up to and how I'm thinking these days.
Yeah, I like it. And I think more and more people are going in that, more and more libertarians, I should say, who kind of came from our side of things, who were raised in the Ron Paul world, are starting to matriculate in that direction, I think, because especially after COVID, I think COVID woke a lot of people up. We have these great principles, this great philosophy, and then, you just watched none of it was applicable, right? We just got steamrolled by our government, and we have to fight back. And it's come down to, like, I voted for Donald Trump. I made the decision like around the July timeframe I was going to. I didn't the previous 2 times that he ran. And for me, there were a lot of issues that contributed to it. Illegal immigration being a large one. Just the cultural wokeness that we've become overrun with, and Trump being sort of this representative against that. Knowing though that he's campaigning on tariffs and things like that, I never viewed Trump as a libertarian, right? And I think a lot of people who are critical of people like you and I, who call ourselves libertarians that voted for Trump, saying, now in hindsight, looking back, saying, well, you voted for Donald Trump and he did this and this and this. Like, I knew he was going to do that, but I still voted for him, and he's still better than the alternative. I mean, it's just crazy to me that a lot of libertarians don't seem to grow up and live in the reality of where we are today, and trying to make the best of it. Right.
Right. And I don't think, growing up necessarily means adopting full-blown statism. I don't think, growing up has to mean that we've got to follow Nick Fuentes and the Groypers off the cliff.
Right.
Or, growing up means that we have to, adopt Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren's economics. right? What I think, growing up and maturing means is that looking at, like, for example, I can accept that the criticisms of Ronald Reagan that libertarians made for years have valid points. That the Hughes Act and the 1986 machine gun ban, it was a terrible crime against the liberties of the people. Most people probably aren't going to agree with libertarians on that, but we love machine guns, and therefore, we see it as a terrible thing. But you also need to know the history of it, know that Congress inserted that into the bill at the very last minute, and that the president doesn't write the laws, and that there were other aspects of the law that were good that he thought outweighed the need for citizens to be able to buy MAC-10s and Uzis and full auto Galils and all those things at the time. And so I moderate my views on Ronald Reagan, noting that if you look at the Republican Party at the time compared to the Republican Party of today, they're so wildly different, right? And the people who dislike Ronald Reagan in the Republican Party today, they dislike him because they think he was too libertarian. They dislike him because they didn't, if you can believe it, right? Those who call themselves the post-liberals are anti-Reagan because they thought Ronald Reagan was too much for economic liberty. They don't want to have anything to do. They thought that the problem with the Republican Party is that, you'll hear people frequently like Tucker Carlson and others say things like, the libertarians have been in charge of policy for decades, right? Which is obviously bullshit. Ridiculous. But what their argument is that, that we had too much, that Reagan was too libertarian. We had too much free trade. That Reagan had amnesty, for example, and that was that created the bluification of California. Strong arguments to be made. And yet there are even more things than just the policies that make nationhood, right? There's the spirit of a nation to an extent, right? So if you consider that the way that the United States was viewed around the world, I don't mind the United States telling the rest of the world to kiss our ass and eat our shorts, and America is number one, and we don't care what other countries. I don't mind, the United States standing alone on certain things when the rest of the world goes haywire. That the United States says, all right, fine, the rest of the world, you be like how that is, and that's fine. The rest of the world is what it is. But to the extent that during the age of Ronald Reagan, the United States was loved around the world and it was coveted around the world, I do miss that, right? I do like I do miss a world that was jealous of the United States, that didn't hate Americans, that there was a culture that was created that made people love the United States. I don't think the only thing that the United States culturally has exported has been this poisonous woke politics. That the United States created woke politics, exported it to the rest of the world. It destroyed Western civilization in France and the UK and in Germany and name another Western nation that has been destroyed by wokeism. And the United States, now we're the ones trying to back away from it, voting for Donald Trump to destroy it, right? But we created it.
Yeah.
So the rest of the world has lots of reasons to be angry at the United States, if they're anything to the right of Joseph Stalin or what have you. If they're not woke, if they're not leftist, if they're conservative at all, they all have reason. Everybody has reason to dislike the United States because if you're a leftist, you hate us because we're friends with Israel and we back them and there are conflicts. If you're on the right, then you have, then you dislike the United States. If you're European, you dislike the United States because we exported wokeism to your country. And because now everybody has to figure out how many genders or what to say, and you can't offend people on the internet because they said things that are in line with what American leftists have created. So there's just almost damn near universal hatred for the United States, which I really don't like and I don't appreciate. And I wish that there was a way for America to be that, to achieve the ideal that Reagan talked about, which was to see the United States as a shining city on a hill.
Exactly.
That the exporting of American products and culture, or like Hollywood, for example. I was in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, John. Hollywood is dead. It's dead.
That's what I've heard.
If it's not being filmed over in the UK, it's almost impossible. I watch all these reels because I dabble I'll dabble a little bit in Hollywood, and I talk to these producers and these filmmakers and these reality show producers, and like 80% of them are out of work. COVID-19 destroyed their industry. I mean, they did it to themselves. But I mean, Hollywood used to be a cultural export. We do have a trade surplus of films with the rest of the world. However, what is the quality of that trade surplus? Well, I mean, the movies that we're making these days, they used to win hearts and minds. You used to watch things like movies from the think about a movie from the 1980s that everybody in the world just freaking loved, or Back to the Future, the Indiana Jones, Animal House, franchises that were created then that just have never really been replicated. And there's the Disneyfication of a lot of these things, if you're talking about wokeism in Hollywood too, of course. And again, a lot of the problems they brought on themselves. But our cultural exports these days, I feel, are at even if there is an actual trade surplus of like Hollywood movies and things like that, there's an intellectual, there's a cultural trade deficit, right? There's a lot of imports that are coming to the United States, coming through illegal immigration, coming through China's dominance of the media and their ability to use their economic power against the United States to force Hollywood movie companies to not make what was the movie Wolverines, where it was in the 80s with Patrick Swayze, and they were all like fighting against the Russian invasion. They remade it, but anyways, they couldn't have it be China invading the United States. They had to change it from China to North Korea because they didn't want to offend the Chinese, because the Chinese is the biggest market in the world, right? And if it's free market and anarchy, well then that's just them serving the customers of the base, right, around the world. But there are consequences to these things, and we need to be able to have these kinds of discussions, have them openly and honestly, while still saying free trade is good, tariffs are bad, taxes are bad, more free trade and liberty is a good thing, but there are negative consequences. Capitalism is the best system, is a terrible system. It just happens to be better than every other system in the world that's ever existed. So I think it's important to acknowledge the downsides, the downfalls of capitalism, while recognizing too that maybe it's still the best system, even if it's got its flaws.
I think that's such a good point, and that's not something that you ever hear people on the right, people who advocate free markets, really talk about. Like, it's important to stress we're never going to have a perfect system. Capitalism is flawed. I mean, we end up with these corporations that get out of control and put poison in our food. Like, these things happen. It's not, if we just open up the market, like libertarians say, everything's going to be wonderful, it'll be a utopia. Not all libertarians, but some, I feel like that's the message, at least. Maybe that's not what they mean, but that's kind of what comes across. So I think it's really important to point out, it's not utopia, but it is the best we can do, having a more free market.
Can I expand on that for just a moment?
Sure.
And I'll tell you, I'm stealing this from a guy who's way smarter than I am. And I spoke to him just this morning on my Wake Up America show. I hope listeners will go and check out this conversation. I'm going to post it later. A gentleman by the name of Devin Erickson. I mean, he considers himself much to be a libertarian. And he was responding to this person who was saying that libertarianism is a form of controlled opposition, that it exists to render the right inept and rudderless. Its sole purpose is to crowd out any serious pushback that might actually endanger the left's monopoly on power. So a pretty harsh criticism of libertarianism. Here's how Devin responded to it. He says, no, libertarianism is the most successful political philosophy, proven to generate the most wealth, the most technological progress, the most human thriving. There's no need to explain why. It's empirically obvious. He says, but I understand your point. Libertarian arguments are being weaponized against Western civilization by crypto-Marxists and degenerate hedonistic freaks. He says, so how could libertarianism be so good for so long, then suddenly become bad? He says, answer is it didn't. The universal and simple principle at play here is that no society can be greater than its people. Libertarianism doesn't work if you have a significant percentage of morons, thugs, and grifters. It doesn't work if you don't have a common culture and a sense of shared identity and purpose. It doesn't work if your cultural values are antisocial or depraved. But the most important thing to realize is neither does anything else. There's no pie chart MBA magic that can save a business if the workers can't do their jobs well. There's no political philosophy that can manage a low quality population into a high quality society. So very important concepts to struggle with. So again, libertarianism, a terrible way to run society, just happens to be the most successful and better than all the others.
Yeah. No, I think that, I mean, there's so much truth in there. I need to read that again and think about it. That's an excellent quote.
I'll send you a link to it in the chat. He's, again, definitely you should speak to him. And I'll drop that in the private chat now and share that with your audience, your listeners, something to grapple with. And check out my full interview with him over on my X page at AP for Liberty, because he goes into more detail on that today.
Absolutely. I'll link to that on the show notes page. So I do want to dig just a little bit for a few moments here into tariffs. And obviously, as Donald Trump was running for president, he talked about running for president this third time. He talked about tariffs. He talked about them in a positive light, saying that he's going to be able to raise all this revenue, all this tax revenue, tease the idea of getting rid of the income tax. So talking about it in a positive light, not touching on, the fact that it's going to raise prices, saying that other countries are going to pay for it, which I don't think Donald Trump is stupid. I think he understands that he knows consumers are going to pay for it, but he's a salesman. He's a deal maker. He also understands that in order to be able to use it to negotiate, if he wants to, he has to sell it as something positive to his base. So you're able to actually use it in negotiations. But it kind of creates this weird thing where you have Donald Trump saying, we need tariffs, we're going to raise all this money. And then as a part of negotiations, as a part of striking a deal with these countries, he does, all right, we'll do a 90-day pause or whatever it is. So there's sort of, libertarians, of course, point to it and say, but if tariffs are so great, then how can you do a 90-day pause? You're giving in, you're giving away the benefit of the tariffs in your mind. So it's kind of been like it's made me mad just to watch libertarians argue about it, because I don't think they even try to understand the point that there is like maybe a diplomacy. There is a diplomacy side to it, right? There's something that Donald Trump is trying to do with his tariffs. They just point to, it's raising prices. It's raising prices. It's a tax that's raising prices. Of course it is. One thing that's really made me just bonkers mad with libertarians is we've had this, I think, a moment here where leftists have recognized tariffs raise prices. And I hear almost nobody saying, okay, leftist, so do corporate taxes. Let's talk about corporate taxes. Let's talk about payroll taxes raising prices. Everything raises prices. It's all about trade-offs and figuring out the best way to make it work. Because, being pragmatic, like you and I are, we're not going to live in a world without taxation. I wish we did. But the way things are set up, the way the markets work, the way the things are regulated, we're not going to live in a tax-free world. So what have been your thoughts on tariffs? Obviously, you voted for Trump. You expected it coming. What's been your observations?
Well, for years, I've always advocated for the rights of people to, enjoy liberties that I never engaged in, right? If I believed in somebody being able to smoke marijuana or enjoy a little recreational cocaine on the weekends, provided that they're consenting adults, it's fine. But of course, I famously draw the line at preventing, children from gaining access to heroin. If they're 5 years old, then, children should not be able to gain access to that.
5 years old is the cutoff for heroin.
Yeah, 5 years old it's a little too young. When it comes to the tariffs, my concern with the question about the tariffs is that, what you've talked about in terms of a negotiation absolutely makes sense. And, I feel like when people hear me talking about the negative consequences of tariffs, they think that I don't acknowledge that if Donald Trump uses the tariffs as a negotiation tool to get a better deal that involves getting lower tariffs on the taken off of the United States, that we get more free trade, then I think that's a legitimate and valid argument to be made, and one that I absolutely acknowledge. Where my concern is the people who actually are advocating for industrial policy, a la Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because once you start to engage in the sort of, central economic planning that's involved in saying, okay, well, tariffs 15% here, 10% there, 10% there. It's kind of like, well, if you can manage that, if you can manage an economy in that way, why can't you manage an economy across the board? So what? The government can't effectively set property tax rates. If it can effectively set tariff rates across the globe, I mean, everything else is just easy peasy, right? Why not modern monetary theory? And then I feel as if like our whole libertarian experiment sort of should be folded and set aside. We might as well just give up and say, yeah, humans can easily centrally plan an economy and control it through central planning. So there's the argument of tactics, which acknowledges that tariffs are bad and that we want fewer tariffs and we want to get a good deal. And I accept that and recognize that and put that on a pedestal and say that's the only argument for tariffs that I can really agree with, other than perhaps like the national security argument that someone like Adam Smith made, right, in a very, very severe exceptions to tariffs. But then, why tariff Canada or Mexico or islands that have no population on them other than penguins and things? But I mean, let's not give in to the arguments that the tariffs are effective at anything other than doing exactly what they're supposed to do, which is raise prices on everybody. I mean, tariffs are just basically another way of saying I hate poor people, because rich people, of course, they will be unimpacted by it, because what do they do at the end of the tariffs? Walmart has already stated that they will be raising their prices in effect because of the tariffs. So they don't pay it. They just push it onto the cost onto the consumer.
But aren't corporate taxes the same though?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I here's the thing. So when I talked about like fighting for everybody else's liberty, tariffs are like the one thing finally that actually, it impacts me, that I'm fighting for. I'm not trying to do recreational cocaine on the weekends, but I do sell a coffee just like you do. Like, where does that coffee come from? It's not in the United States. I guarantee it. It's coming from Colombia. It's coming from Guatemala. It's coming from Peru. And this is a staple of our morning breakfast fare. People got to have their coffee, and Folgers will be able to afford it, and John Odermatt and AP for Liberty won't be able to, right? So we'll have to increase our prices. And if the big corporation wants to eat it and not pass it on, they don't have to. But people like us, we probably have to. We probably have to pass it on. Then what happens is we get out competed in the market, because we have to charge high. The smaller guys do have to charge higher prices. So this is one of those things where, here, you and I, we're trying to escape the rat race. We're trying to not have a boss. We're trying to be our own boss. We're trying to live the American dream and not be corporate wage slaves, be able to make a living in the American dream, which I would say is like sales and commerce and mercantile. But man, everybody loves the working class, but nobody loves nobody loves the laptop class. Nobody loves the class of people like yourself and myself. The more,
Sure.
We're not blue collar here on our podcasts, right? Let's just own it. Okay, we're an elite institution that's been created by the largesse of the freedom of a free market, laissez-faire, capitalistic economy that is built on the basis of international free trade. Otherwise, there's no coffee being sold, John. There's no. You and I, we are sort of like some of the ultimate. In the sense we're enjoying some of the ultimate freedoms that humans have never enjoyed. I don't know about you, but I got a little baby, my first child. She's 10 months old, and I have been able to be with her every single day of her life. And how many fathers could say that throughout history, that they were able to work in the home, bring home the bacon, do amazing, be a good father, and be in the house to take care of things, and not have somebody breathing over your shoulder. You can't say that. You can't do that. You got to do this there. You got to sling ice, do all this shit that is unrelated to your job and all this kind of stuff. You can't go on vacation. You can't take that many days. If you're sick, blah, blah, blah. Like, we are to some extent gods, John, but only our powers can be taken away in an instant by a class of people that doesn't understand free trade, that doesn't believe in free markets, that doesn't believe in capitalism, that looks jealously on the precious jewels of liberty that people like yourself and myself enjoy, and will use government to take them away because of what is socialism but the politics of envy, greed, and a desire to punish people that they see as their enemies. Because, John, whether or not you and I think ourselves as to be on the side of the people, the side of the working class, I don't think the American people do think that we're their allies. I think that they look at us as globalists. You're importing products from overseas. You're not supporting America. What does your coffee come from Hawaii, by the way, John?
No, and
no.
Enemy
Enemy of the working class, enemy of the right, enemy of Steve Bannon, enemy of Josh Hawley, enemy of Donald Trump, enemy of MAGA. You're an enemy of the United States. You know, you should be you can buy coffee from Hawaii. Why don't you? Right. So, I mean, this is the attitude that we are dealing with right now on this thing, right? It's ignorant, it's wrong, and it deserves some pushback from some libertarians like myself and yourself.
So let me ask you this. Let's keep talking about the Republican Party. We're almost out of time here. Can you go a little bit past the hour? Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Republican Party, because you and I both voted for Trump. One of the big reasons why I did was Elon Musk coming on board. That late assist from Ron Paul. I'd already decided I was voting, but with Elon talking about maybe we'll bring on Ron Paul for the Department of Government Efficiency to consult. I think that did bring some libertarians on board at the last minute. We saw fraud and waste being exposed by Doge. The American people, I think, in large, support Doge. We've had this big, beautiful bill come through that implemented, codified none of what Doge revealed. And we're kind of in a spot right now where the Republican Party just is not listening to the people who put them in power, which has happened before. So we shouldn't be surprised. But what do you see in your crystal ball here? We look forward 2 years, 4 years down the road.
Yeah, I see. I'm trying not to black pill, right? I'm always looking at, trying to find silver linings in these clouds. The biggest silver lining that I see for people who believe what we believe is probably, unfortunately, overseas with the Javier Milei of Argentina, who I see as probably our brightest star in terms of hope. But what's fascinating is that he doesn't really get a lot of love from American libertarians, and I think it has a lot to do with the Jewish question that a lot of right-wingers and libertarians are struggling with right now. And in terms of the United States, I would say that it all depends on sort of where the post-Trump GOP goes, because nobody, not J.D. Vance, not Marco Rubio, not Lindsey Graham, not whoever it is that is kind of the standard bearer after Donald Trump will ever be Donald Trump. They will never be able to command the same kind of respect or gravitas that Donald Trump was, because none of them have what Donald Trump has. None of them have the gravitas. None of them have the fortune. None of them have the fame. None of them have the humor, which I think is probably Donald Trump. Probably his biggest asset is that he's funny. Agreed. And if you're funny, people will like you. It doesn't matter what you believe. You can be the biggest. I mean, if you're a communist, people might even love you even more, right? If you're a funny communist, there's a lot of those out there.
Are there? There's a lot of funny communists, really?
Yeah, there are. There's a lot of them, and they've made some of the best movies in the last 40, 50 years, right? Seth Rogen, for example, is a perfect example. But the Republican Party, because the Trump coalition was so diverse, it will splinter. Everybody's going to fight over the scraps. I think it's probably going to be, what was it? Was it the Roman Empire or was it the Byzantine Empire or Charlemagne? I'm trying to think of who was the great emperor from history. Was it Alexander? Yeah, it was Alexander the Great, who he unified the empire and conquered, all of the known world essentially. And then as soon as he died, everything went to his top generals, and they all squandered it, and everything fell apart. Right. So I see it probably going in that kind of sense, that Trump is kind of like an Alexander the Great style figure. He will not name a successor unless it's his son, unless it's Barron, or whether it's Donald Trump Jr. He may try to engineer, a takeover, kind of like Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida with his wife Casey. He's kind of trying to, before his governorship is over, sort of hand the governorship to her in a sense. It seems
DeSantis might be even the more skilled politician, hearing her speak, than Ron DeSantis.
Maybe, right? And so maybe he'll try and engineer a transfer to her. I can see Trump trying to engineer a transfer either to Eric Trump or to Donald Trump Jr. Or to Barron Trump, which if he wanted to pick anybody, probably Barron Trump would be even the easiest, even if he doesn't have the experience, he's not old enough. Donald Trump Jr. is very much primed for that kind of position, but I don't think Donald Trump Jr. has the same oomph that Donald Trump Sr. has.
He definitely doesn't. Yeah. And I don't know if he has the aspirations either. I don't know if he wants that.
I think he probably does. I mean, he's way more there. Right now, the Trump family is just enriching themselves to the hilt with cryptocurrency, investments in Dubai and Qatar, and there's so much money coming through this. I think it's a Liberty crypto institution that they're creating that's like been funded from a lot of these Middle Eastern tycoons. So right now they're focused on building up their capital, and I can see, if there's going to be a power transfer, I don't see Trump handing it off to JD Vance, and the reason why is because JD Vance is not his family, and Trump takes care of his family and looks after them first. So I see him probably trying to pull a Ron DeSantis to Casey DeSantis kind of switcheroo after he's gone with one of his kids. That's what I think he'll attempt. It might work, it might not work. But I know for a fact that, the reason why I think this is because after he was elected, a reporter said, "Is JD Vance, the heir apparent or whatever?" And he says no. He said specifically no, and it was kind of like, whoa, that's a pretty strong statement, right? Instead of like dithering or anything like that, he says, "No, I don't think he is." Kind of like, "Oh, he's your VP. Wouldn't you hope that he would? Because JD Vance is absolutely going to run for president in the next election cycle." So I mean, I think it ends like Alexander the Great, to be honest, if I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, the one thing the Republican Party has going for it is they're opposed by the Democrat Party, and they are equally dysfunctional.
Yes. Good point. Good point, John. Good conversation.
One last question, and then I'll let you get on your way. I know you're a busy guy. What are your thoughts, talking about the future Republican Party? What are your thoughts on Vivek Ramaswamy? I know he's running for governor of Ohio. Has some interesting ideas. I like the guy. I know some people are turned off by him.
Love him. The things that people criticize him for sound like the exact same kind of things people were criticizing me for when I ran for president in 2016. I was about his age. Now I'm looking at him, he's like a whip cracking youngster, and he's smart, savvy, smarter than I ever was, savvier than I ever was, just a sharp guy. And I feel as if he really is our best hope in terms of the next generation of libertarian leadership, because he threads the needle with his libertarian nationalism, which I very much identify with. I consider myself a libertarian. I consider myself a nationalist. I'm a member of the Republican Party because I have to be in order to try and move my ideas forward, because that's what matters. Republican by expediency. And a nationalist in that I believe in America first, and I love my country, and I would never betray my country, and a libertarian because I believe that the ideals of the United States are built on economic freedom and personal liberty. So Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, he's like our Javier Milei to some extent. I don't know if depending on how well he does as governor of Ohio, should he win, which I think he will, and I hope he will, then he could be the libertarian leader. He could be our Javier Milei going into the future. But there is a lot of resistance to people of different melanin counts here in the United States. If he was a Democrat, the Democrats would have him as their leader right now. He would be the leader of the. If he were a Democrat, he would be the leader of the Democratic Party, because no other person in the Democratic Party comes close to his savvy, his wit, his ability to speak to crowds. I mean, the MAGA people got mad at him last December, I think on purpose, because they didn't, I think that they don't like his libertarianism, like what they don't like about Ronald Reagan, they probably don't like about Vivek. And then, of course, a lot of it is identity politics, because the right has taken up the identity politics banner as much as the left has too. So that's where I think some of the dislike for Vivek Ramaswamy comes from, because he's not of their identity. And so there's a lot of hurdles. There's a lot of speed bumps to Vivek Ramaswamy's rise to be our Javier Milei, but he's probably our best bet, to be quite honest, because he's smarter than any libertarian I know, or more savvier than any libertarian I see out there who's just trying to make a name for themselves with, clicks and internet debates. He strikes me as a man who has a plan, and God bless him. I hope he succeeds. I like him a lot.
Yeah. And he's always been that savvy. You look back, there was a video released of his high school graduation. He was a valedictorian. You watch it, exact same guy. It's not like this is something that he's learned recently and he's kind of trying to slime people over. It's just the guy's just brilliant and a great communicator. But
agreed.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Austin Petersen. Give your plugs. Let us know if people can support you, read what you're writing, watch what you're doing.
I'm just glad that Lions of Liberty is still out there doing their thing, man. I remember you guys from all the way back in 2015 and 2016, and you guys are still out there pumping, and I'm glad to see it. I'm always been a podcasting man myself, so if people who are listening to this enjoy podcasts, if you want to get a live show listening to in the morning so you can find out what's going on in the world from a liberty perspective, but it's not beating you over the head with Bitcoin every 5 seconds. It's a fun political news talk show with culture and goofs and gaffs, and it's totally live, 2 hours in the morning. You can tune in and out anytime you like. It's designed to be listened to on your drive to work like you would any other radio show, but it's a live video talk show. It's rumble.com/AP4Liberty. That's rumble.com/AP4Liberty. And if you head over there, click follow, join us Mondays through Fridays, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. And we'd love to see some of our friends from the Lions of Liberty over there, and vice versa. So appreciate you guys.
Yeah, for sure. And that's AP, the number 4 Liberty, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. AP4 Liberty. And you can check out my podcast there at rumble.com/AP4Liberty. Appreciate you, John.
All right. Appreciate you, Austin. Thanks for coming on the show, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye now. All right, guys, that wraps up my show with Austin Petersen. Of course, if you love our content here at Lions of Liberty and you want more of it, you can get that. You can get more content by joining our Lions of Liberty Pride, either on Patreon or over on Locals. Brian McWilliams has his daily good morning bleep rants, about 5-minute shows that he does almost every day. Plus, we're going to have more content coming from myself, from Lou Perez, from Brian Nichols, more bonus content in your feed. So come join us. Would love to have you. We're growing like crazy here at Lions of Liberty, and we want to bring you along with us. So with that being said, guys, hopefully you enjoyed today's show as much as I did. I'll see you all next week. In the meantime, always remember to keep your head up and those fires of liberty burning.